co-founder of Imagine This Women's Film Festival. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Shorts Program 2, where you can find the films on our online channel, which is SparkFest. Thank you so much for joining. And right now, we're just going to ask the filmmakers if they can introduce themselves and also introduce their project as well. Jet, would you like to go first?
It's okay. My name is Jet Kracht. I'm living in Amsterdam. And yeah, I'm a writer-director. Before this, I was an actor for a long time. And then I start writing. And I think it's super interesting because you know a lot about characters and stories, but from a different background. And now I'm totally exploring, what I want to tell, what I want to share. And I made a movie, Blue Rain, a short movie. And it's about a couple who loses a baby. And I make this because of I had an abortion. It was 8 years ago. And 3 weeks ago, I had a miscarriage. So there's a lot going on about, it's not a baby you lose, but it's the way there's life. Yeah, there's life in your body and you lose it. So it's about grief, but it's also about loving something you don't know. And when it's not there, you miss it. So it was super confusing for me to miss something and I want to give it love, but it was not possible. So in that feeling, I want to make the movie, like the struggle with this two sides of what was happened to there was that was my inspiration. So
who would like to go next?
I can go next. Excuse me. My name is Neha Gautam, and I'm the director of a short film called Passenger Seat. The film is about a young girl and her relationship with her father, who is a taxi cab driver, and how their relationship changes as his business starts to decline with the rise of like rideshare apps. It's a personal film. My father passed away, but he was a taxi cab driver until he passed away. And the co-writer of the film, her father is a taxi driver. But we brought in some of the recent historical struggle of taxi drivers in New York City. And they went on hunger strike because 14 of them committed suicide in 2019. So we brought in a little bit of that movement and story into the story as well.
Thank you. Salette? Let me know if I'm pronouncing it.
It's Soleil.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm the producer of Exo Marisol, and this film, Valeria and I created as our senior thesis project from Chapman University. And it was definitely like a big collaboration from different female perspectives. And I don't know if Valeria wants to introduce the film.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, I'm Valeria, the writer and director of Exo Marisol, which is a story about a young girl who discovers herself and also better understands her relationship with her mother, with the discovery of a diary. And it's also a film that is deeply personal and rooted in family and my Latinx heritage.
Thank you. And who would like to go next? Yolanda?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My film is a short film. It's called Biking While Black. It is a 29-minute film that's based really on my lived experience, but also the purpose of the film is to create more equitable environments here in Los Angeles and beyond. Most communities of color are communities that have been redlined and disenfranchised. And so this film taps into kind of the experiences that bicyclists have, as well as transportation planners, or what they're working on to improve these issues. So it's really kind of a justice plea to change the way that our government agencies are funding and improving infrastructure so that Black lives and brown lives can simply get out and bike. And it works for mental health, it works for our physical health, and it works for the community as a whole. And that also taps into policing and unjust policing for when we do get out and bike, please stop pulling us over because we're moving in space, and also racial profiling that's involved in that. So there's a lot of data that backs up these testimonies, and that's included in it as well. So thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, of course. Thank you for submitting. And Katrina, if you're able to speak with us, join in.
Hello, how is everybody doing? My name is Katrina Brooke Flores. And the film that I did is Asaman, which means sky in Wolof. The film is an experimental film. We call it a love letter to the future. That's told through an indigenous and Afrofuturist sonic vision. It is, like I said, an experimental film, my first film. I got into doing this film by being in a residency in Chicago called Dark Matter Residency, Afrofuturist residency there. And this was in the height of COVID. I'm a performance artist. And so we couldn't be with live audience. And so they asked us to work digitally. And it gave me an opportunity to play in a new digital space that I hadn't done before. The film is really about diaspora, healing intergenerationally and having conversations about conversations that I guess call for and evoke a space for ancestors and future ancestors to commune and co-conspire with us now. And it's really about joy and being able to search within ourselves to find our peace, to find our joy, and to heal those pieces of us that have, so many things have happened, I think, to Black and Indigenous folks. And it's about how we can heal not only ourselves, but by doing that, we're healing our futures and also our ancestors, right? We're going through as well. So the story came to me. I always say this, like, we tell the stories that are ours to tell, and just being amongst you all today and what you guys are sharing, it sounds like that is true for everybody in this room. The story came to me because I had found a photo of my grandfather who had passed, my great-great-grandfather who had passed. When my grandfather passed, my dad and I, we went to his house to, take care of all the things and do the ceremonies. And we found a photo that we had never seen before of my great-great-grandfather. And when we found that photo, we said, oh, there is a story here that hasn't been told. And so through uncovering that story, we found out that we have Senegalese ancestry. 2 weeks after that, I was performing at an Indigenous youth benefit concert in Chicago, and I ran into another performer who I had never known or met before that night, came up to me. He said he had a vision. We were supposed to work together. This person is Tukiman. He's a Senegalese producer, singer, songwriter from Dakar. And he also plays the main character, Tuki, and in the film. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's a lot to put on me. You just come up to somebody, say something like this. So he wanted to like me to come to his house where he had the studio. I said, we can go get coffee at a public place and see what possibilities of connection there may be. But I had a installation I had just created. And I said, oh, and he was going to be on a radio show where my artist studio was. I said, just come half an hour early. I'll photograph you my installation and we'll have an opportunity to chat there in a safe space for me. And that's when we found out not only that I found out he was from Dakar and I had just found out about my Senegalese ancestry, but we also found out that we were born on the exact same day, same year, same month. And so we call ourselves Cosmic Twins. So it's it's a cosmic twin love story with the future, and about having those really important conversations. So much of our history and knowledge has been covered up or kept from us, and so it's just a reclaiming of that in a wholeness kind of way. And also cosmic twin stories. If you know a lot of origin stories, indigenous origin stories, both from Africa and the indigenous Americas, cosmic twins are a big part of origin stories. So this is, I guess, if you will, a new true fable of new cosmic twins. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And Murray.
Oh, hello, I'm Murray Peters. I'm the writer-director of Woman Meets Girl. Basically, it's a story about two women, one in her 40s and one is an 18-year-old sex worker. And the older woman has invited this young woman to come stay with her for a period of time. And the film kind of explores the relationship between the two of them and sort of how, they may be more similar than dissimilar. And I guess I was just interested in telling a story that was about, I really like the duality of people, I guess, and how no one person is one thing. And so kind of exploring how these two characters to me are very much two sides of the same coin. And I was also interested in making like a love story that didn't feel overly sentimental, I guess. And exploring this idea of like learning to love yourself by letting somebody else love you.
Thank you. If you guys can share with us how your personal background or your experiences has influenced your filmmaking style and or your stories to choose how you choose your films to tell your stories. Whoever wants to go.
I can go first. For me, I guess because I'm also a writer, I like to mine from my own life, I guess. And so I'm always kind of finding what are the things kind of going on in my life, maybe at a specific time, or something that I've been maybe ruminating on, or maybe it's also something that's happened recently that I want to like explore further. And then of course, it's also very important for me to tell stories that are about like women, Black people, queer people, all of those intersections.
Thank you. And who would like to go next?
I can
I'll
go.
go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No,
So, do you
Valeria.
want to go first? Okay. I just want to say that my culture is very important to me. I consider my culture to be my North Star. And so my family and my heritage is all always at the root of everything I do and everything I want to continue doing in filmmaking specifically. So everything I do is always with attention to honor and represent my community and all the stories I do. And that's basically where this story comes from, just reflecting on my culture and also specifically the women within my culture and kind of honoring the prominent female figures in my life.
And for me, throughout the years that I've been in film, I've kind of struggled to find a space where I felt comfortable as a female filmmaker, especially with just more male-dominated areas. And so with that, when I met Valeria and I heard her story and her passion towards it, I really knew that female filmmaking and collaboration in that aspect was very important to me. And I also wanted to kind of learn more about other cultures more and how we can connect our stories even through different cultures, but being female, and that was just very important to me.
And how did you guys collaborate?
So we were, how our thesis class was structured is that the producers and the directors can write, or the producers can write. And I have written in the past, but I really wanted to collaborate with the director who wrote. And so I saw her script and I reached out to her, and we kind of talked from there, and we had very similar values in our filmmaking. And then that's where we agreed to work together.
And Mary, I'm going to go back to you. I'm really interested to know why you chose to make the sex worker much younger.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was a variety of reasons. But I guess the main one was again around like that idea that no one person is one thing, and wanting to kind of play with the reversal expectations, and that thing of like you can find connection in the most kind of unexpected places. And, you know, as I said, I think that the two characters are kind of two sides of the same coin, and where one kind of has maybe more experience in one area and less experience in another, they kind of like mirror each other, I guess, in that way. Yeah, and I guess when I was younger, I always sort of had this feeling of being, I don't know, just having a hard time maybe connecting with other kind of people who were my age, you know, at like that 16, 17, 18-year-old or whatever. And, you know, even now I would still say that like I have definitely a lot of people in my life that I would consider close to me that are, you know, 20, 30 years older than me, you know what I mean, that I would consider as close friends. And so I think it's just that thing of like, yeah, connection can come from anywhere, and you shouldn't kind of judge anybody from that kind of first impression, I guess.
Thank you. And who would like to go next?
Yeah, I would like to go. I think, yeah, good question. But I think for me, it's always about traumas, and it's about that we act in a way in society, or I also studied psychology, so we are acting, but behind our behavior is something else most of the time. And I want to tell stories that you see somebody, but maybe that's not the real person, because you really don't know, like on judgmental way. And I think it's also because my mother was 17 and she got me, and she struggled super hard to raise me up. And yeah, people don't know it. And that's why I was super interested in stories of other persons. And I worked a lot in healthcare, and I saw so many difficult behaviors, but behind those behaviors is a lot of stories. And I want to tell that kind of stories, and it can be from everybody. If I can connect emotionally, it is possible, I think.
Guess I'll share mine. I came into this process of filmmaking, actual filmmaking, later in my life. It's been a barrier, even though going through design school, art school that featured filmmaking. You know, it was always told to me over the decades that it's not. You know, there's no access to it. There's like all these barriers that I was told I had to jump through. So through the process of bicycling is what brought me into filmmaking. So I am an advocate and activist turned filmmaker, because I wanted to be able to create platforms for folks to share their narratives. And that, I think, is also kind of in a personal experience where those platforms weren't available. So the work that stands out to me are documentary narratives that really aim to value human life and value the voice and the power of human life. And so what I've learned over the past 2 years of getting into filmmaking is that no matter what the budget is, how powerful a film can be, whether it's a 9-minute or 29-minute. And so that's what I really strive every time I'm out and I'm talking with folks that are speaking about it, inequity, justice issue, or joy, and how they overcame that inequity. I'm in my mind, I'm filming that, through this 2-year process of success that I've had. So I feel that that's what we need in America. That's what we need in the world, is to create platforms where we show and showcase individuals that don't value their own selves and don't even understand what it means to hear themselves and their value. And so I think the films that I've created so far have really already shown kind of the outcome of people beginning to believe in themselves. And also it is an act of decolonization because through colonization, we're told, and many times Black and Brown and Indigenous lives are told that our voices don't matter. So that's how I want to use film, and that's how I have in these 2 years, is to prove and to indicate that our voices do matter, and how film, along with other materials and coming together as community, can change the world.
And have you seen any like changes with brown Black people riding the bikes?
Yes, so much. It's a bit overwhelming trying to, when we talk about capacity, and it's like when you hear people talking, when you see what they're doing and the conversations they want to have, it's as the filmmaker and the activist, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the next step? How do I build from this? So yeah, that's what I'm going through now. And we've also created we just finished, because these films have been funded by a government agency called SCAG, which stands for Southern California Association of Governments. And so each year, the grant was a little bit more, and this is going into my 3rd year. This 3rd year, we didn't build on a film. We actually created a guide that would go with the film so that we can help direct the conversation and also the actions.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful that, the steps, it's actually making change. And that's what a lot of documentary films actually do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Katrina?
Well, I love this question. I'm a visual artist, and so as well as a dancer, movement artist, and with sound as well. And so for me, my approach visually, or like how to create the film, the look of it, I not only was the like writer director, but I also was the production designer, and I did half of the costuming as well. Not only designing it, but then executing and making it. So like the beadwork you see on Ashay's head, I made that. The cosmic painting, I did that, so I really enjoyed the process of working with my hands as well as my mind, and having those two, like my whole being, right, that mind, body, spirit, be able to like be in cahoots, to like co-conspire to create something, to manifest that thing, not from just the mind but into that reality, like in that way too, in terms of like the design of the film or like the costuming. And so that was like really exciting. We shot both in Chicago, Indiana, and also in Senegal. And so it was also the process of going to the market and picking out the fabrics, right, that we would then like turn into some of the wearable designs in the film. And so just even that process, right, of being in that space and making those choices, like, is all for me like just such a like a tactile experience of that like ceremony. In that's what I guess is, like I said, it's my first film, so I kind of, for me it was like the whole process was ceremony, and all of those little bits were important to like get to that final piece, right? So like every little thing for me has a story, like how this got chose or how this was created, or the way we ended up getting to this was because we needed to create a workaround, but how did we do that, you know, and how was that done in community? And so like also we did we were shooting during COVID, obviously a lot of us probably were, and so we did like before we would shoot, we would do like we used Adrienne Marie Brown Brooke Pleasure Activism, and we used that book to kind of like have conversations before we would shoot, you know, so that we would be able to like be more open to each other. So I really enjoyed that process too, and I think it translates into the experience of what audience sees when they interact with our film. And then what else was I going to say? Oh, for me, magical realism is something that I really love. It's something that like was very important to me growing up in the books that I read, because it was so hard to find, I think, stories and visual stories when I was growing up. I'm 45. So to find that kind of content that spoke to me where I saw myself. And so I think that more and more of that is becoming real for our young people, and I'm so happy about that. But for me, when I did find things, oftentimes it was magical realism, right? And it was these stories of like, I really love Afrofuturism, Indigenous futurism. I love it because it's asking us, like, right, to see ourselves, of course, reflected in the past, but to make sure that we are creating space for us to be at the center of what the future looks like. Because so often I think we're written out of the future, and I don't want to live in a future that we are not the center of. And so, like, I feel like that process of magical realism for me is really like it's not magic, like in the sense of it's not real. Like it's magic in the sense of like we're very powerful and our ancestors are powerful and we've been given a lot, and it's been definitely tried to be covered and taken away from us, but our storytelling being real, and visual storytelling is like, it's such a beautiful medicine and power that we have. And so that's kind of how I approached the visualization and coming up with the story around Asana.
Thank you. Nia?
Can you? Oh, thank you. I was going to say, can you mute me? Because I don't know how. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I hear so much like overlap with a lot of us, and yeah, I think when I was thinking of this story, I firstly wanted to tell something that was like nuanced, and but I wasn't thinking of what I was making it in reaction to, but just that I wanted to like make a tender film. I, like many femmes of color, grew up at the intersections of being a woman of color, an immigrant, working class, and queer. And so like sometimes when I watch films, I feel like those nuances, those layers are not in films. And so when I was collaborating with the co-writer, we just kind of talked about all our memories and with our fathers. And then, you know, I think now looking back, it becomes really like a form of resistance, because when we see South Asian representation in films, it's usually like middle-class South Asians that are like doctors or engineers, or that like promote this like model minority myth, and that we don't like all grow up like that. And so you know, I wanted to bring in the nuance of class and immigration, and also represent the layers of who we were. I think growing up, I just remember being really enraged because everything that I saw about South Asian men, they were either terrorists or like really, you know, tropes, just caricatures, you know, Apu and The Simpsons, just like really exaggerated accents done by white men that weren't even like human. And so I wanted to make something that humanized the men that I knew growing up. My father, who was just like, you know, really tender. My grandfather was also a taxi cab driver. And it wasn't the things that I was seeing in the media weren't what I knew. So we wanted to we drew a lot from our personal experiences. A lot of what happened in the film happened to us. I think there was just like a lot of there was just a moment of internalizing the shame of being working class, where I didn't want to be seen in a cab. And that's kind of the whole basis of the story, is just like, that always stuck with me because I couldn't articulate it until much later. It's just like, I didn't want to be seen outside my school getting out of a the front seat. And so, but when I share the film, I realize that that's like a common experience with children of taxi drivers. It's so that becomes a thing now, because it's not just me. It's like, why are we internalizing that there's something wrong with that? So it was kind of just like putting this story to life and then having a conversation about it. But everything that's happened, that we thought of for the film, like the first shot of the film, it opens up in front of a house, and that house that we used was like my childhood home that I grew up in. I don't live in there anymore, but like all the locations, we shot on location in Queens, and Queens is like one of the most diverse zip codes in the United States. And so we just like asked people to shoot, it was a lot, mostly shooting outside. But we just thought of the memories that we had, like shopping for like spices, with our parents in the South Asian market. And so that's like there. It's just like kind of bringing all those like nuanced memories to life. And my background is in documentary. So I think that informs a lot of the narrative that I do, is just like, I'm always shooting on location. I try to use like, actors that are like early in their career or non-actors, because I feel like all of that helps me to believe the world, because it's kind of a mix of doc and narrative. Like Yolanda, I also come from an organizing background, so we knew that we were gonna like work with the taxi workers union and think about impact. So like when we were writing the script, we talked to the taxi workers union, and we had them chime in on the script. And also we wanted to bring in, like, a lot of people didn't know what was happening with the taxi drivers. Obviously everybody uses Lyft and Uber, but they were like, I don't know what's happening with taxis. Like, so it was just kind of a way to like inform people about that impact on workers, and how they could get involved. We leave the website at the end. But it's interesting because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I have great memories in a taxi cab, and I talked to the driver, and we shared our stories, and he told me he's from blah blah blah. And it's like everybody has these kind of memories, and so hopefully like people kind of think a little bit more about the families of these drivers. And they're not just drivers, they have kids. And it's in New York, like 90% of the drivers are South Asian. So, most of them are immigrants, and they left behind communities, homes, because of displacement. And there's just like, there's so much there. But I don't think I ever, it was like the movie we wanted to see, but we never saw.
And is there a reason why you went with that route as opposed to making a documentary, being that your background is in documentary?
Yeah, I think, well, like Celeste and Valeria, this was my thesis film in school. So I wanted the challenge of writing something, but actually Vice did a big story on taxi drivers. And so there was some, like a few years ago, there was a lot of media and press about the hunger strike. And I think, like I said, to use the challenge of making a narrative, but informed by real things, right? Real places, shooting on location, having non-actors. To me, there's like a lot of B-roll that's doc, like at the end, we end with something I shot from a strike that was real, so it's like merging worlds, bringing those worlds together. And So to me, I think, sometimes I watch doc and people that are informed by narrative, like people make reenactments. And so I think that there's like endless amount of ways to make a narrative or a doc, and wherever you come from before will inform that. But I think giving ourselves permission to play and to do what honors our own vision is like a beautiful thing.
Thank you. And if you guys can share like a memorable moment that was behind the scenes from making your film that stands out the most to you. Whoever wants to jump in.
Well, I can go ahead. Just from the first thing I remembered was at the end of a long day, one of our lead actresses, her birthday had been like the past week. So we had surprised her with like a little cupcake at the end of the day, and everyone gathered around to sing happy birthday to her. And so cast crew, everyone was there, and it was a really sweet moment. And it felt like a little community we had created on set, that everyone was friendly with each other, and it was a nice place to be at the end of the day.
Thank you. What about you, Jet?
Yeah. Maybe it's a little bit heavy because there was like I worked with two producers, and they were both in a sort of a trajectory to be a father, and there was a miscarriage also there, and they were also on set. So it was like the subject was really, relatable.
Mhm.
So that was going on behind the scenes, and there was a baby on set. So who did a great job. The baby was surprised that the baby was so nice, and but there was a lot of also good conversations about the topic, and really open conversations. I'm really I think it was also nice that it was so open about the topic.
And have you worked with the producers before?
Yes, but only when I was an actress.
Oh, when you were an actress. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know them from the crew, but now they want to help me to make this movie. So, yeah.
Oh, nice. Who would like to go next?
I'll have to say that behind the 15 advocates that we interviewed, after each interview was pretty much the same in terms of just coming together as advocates, as humans in this struggle to both stand up against racism, but also to be able to have those moments and talk about, what brings us joy. And one in particular that I'll share at this moment, because I think that this particular interview was the hardest to take. And that was the girlfriend of Dejan Kidzee, who was 26 years old and was shot 15 times in the back. He was pulled over because he was riding his bike on the wrong side of the street. And while he had a history of being in jail, growing up in an impoverished community and poverty in his family, likely so. But this day he wasn't committing a crime. He was just a young Black man riding his bike on the wrong side, supposedly the wrong side of the street, which people do every day. And he didn't want to be harassed, so he ran, and they shot him 15 times in the back. So having the conversation with his girlfriend, she was crying, after our interview, and just sharing kind of what she herself is going through and the depression, and she cries every day, and she's also a mom, and that conversation was real, that was genuine, and that was basically a year ago, going on 2 years now, actually, and we still talk. today. We still support each other today. So just, it was moving because it shows the power of genuinely taking the time to listen. And genuinely saying, if you're going to stay in contact with someone, if you're going to uplift someone in some form or fashion, that you do it. And so we still continue to support each other. And of course, her boyfriend is in our film, so she's very, it helps uplift her to see someone that's supporting her.
Thank you.
Mm.
Trina?
Yeah, so for me, a moment, I'm sorry, my babies. If they might, you might be hearing some yelling in the background in the car. My apologies.
That's okay.
Well, I guess to that point, I was 6 months postpartum when we filmed. And so I think that process of just not having a lot of control during COVID and having your first child, and all of this stuff happening, just it made me really like light on my feet, like flexible, like there was just so little control over so much. And so it just made me like real flexible and light on my feet to see like anything that came our way during the filming was like a blessing and positive, and it just needed to be like thought of that way and brought in that way, even if it was a workaround. And so there was one day we were shooting some of the last scenes in the film in this garden. It's like at the end of the film, you see some of those scenes. And one of the women I had casted, she showed up and she was like on her way. We had sent like the driver to get her, and she called me and she was like, so I wasn't supposed to have my daughter today, but I have my daughter. So can I bring her to the shooting? And I was like, absolutely, 100%. And so she got there. I already kind of had a feeling like in my gut that meant like, because I know her daughter too. So I knew that Lala would want to be in the film, So I was like, oh man, how can I like, when they get here, how can I like make sure that's an option for Lala if she wants it, she chooses it, and she sure did. And so I had some scraps of some of the material I had used for the costuming for the girls that day. And so we found a way to make a costume on site for her that made sense, and in that moment wrote her into the film, in a way, and it made complete sense at the end of the day, so instead of it being like a nuisance or an annoyance or having a bad vibe about it, it was like just open arm, like yes and yes and yes, and we're going to make it work, and if she chooses to be part of it, we're going to center her in that experience. And it was such a beautiful, I think, experience for both Jazz and Lala, to have that as a mother-daughter experience. And then for all the women, because it was all about women that day shooting, for her to be just like surrounded by like older women she could see as like elders or like looking up to, and just feel like she was actually the center of like the star for that day. I feel like that was one of the memories that kind of pop up to me as a really beautiful moment.
Thank you. And what about you, Murray?
Well, we were supposed to shoot the film over one weekend, and because we ended up shooting during COVID, after our first day, we had to shut down. So then we weren't able to finish shooting the film until basically a year to the day later. So getting that final cut was definitely, especially sweet of a moment.
And how many hours did it take to film the short film?
We did 2 12-hour days.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And lastly, actually not lastly, with your projects, your films, what do you want people to learn from it?
I can start. I think that one of the most powerful things in making this film was kind of giving other people their permission to make the films that they wanted to make, or just do anything that they wanted to do, because as we all know, it's like film is very inaccessible, you know, for a lot of people, for women, for working class people, but we also like have to do it, you know, like with whatever we have. I remember when we were shooting, there was a little girl that came up to me, and she was with her mom, and she was just watching us. And she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're making a movie." And she said, "What is it about?" And I was like, "Well, it's kind of about me." And she was like, "Oh," and I don't know, the girl was like 6 or 7. And I said, "You know, would you like to make a movie?" And she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Yeah, well, you can do that," you know. And it just like, I think it's true. It's like it's hard to be what you can't see, you know. And so like when you do something, it gives someone else permission to do it, to know that they can do it. And that's like really powerful. I think, you know, all the people that don't feel seen, and then realize that they can also create something that validates them, that get, you know, that says that this thing was important and they want to make something out of it.
Anyone else?
I think, for me, it's about like it's okay to have grief over something you don't know. Like also for women who can't be a mother, that they also sometimes have a period of grief that they can't be a mother or something, and that it is really okay to grieve, and that we don't feel ashamed about it. I think I feel a lot of shame about this grieving process, and I think that I want to learn that having emotions about it's really okay to have it and to share it and to show it also, and that's fine, I think. And that's the only real release of something.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Anyone else?
I can go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. From the film, I would say what I want people to walk away with is that traffic violence is real, and also the remnants of redlining. And if you're not familiar with redlining, you know, get familiar, because the remnants of redlining have left many communities of color a dangerous places to move around within, and to be aware of that many Black and Brown and Indigenous lives that live in these communities are at danger. And so to look at space differently, and also to make room for bicyclists, because the country's changing in terms of how our roads are being reconfigured, and who's affected by it most are Black and Brown lives. And then also to make that attachment, because there's an ecosystem of how it's all attached, but to make that attachment to how law enforcement continues to create barriers for Black and Brown lives to simply move around to get from point A to point B. And if we're concerned with the even bigger picture of the ecosystem, which is climate crisis, then that means that we have to get out of our cars and get on bikes and walk and use public transit, where we have to feel safe by doing that. And in particular, when I say we, who is targeted at this time, if it's not through traffic violence, which is speeding, it's through enforcement, are Black and Brown lives. So to look at space in a way beyond what we have been taught, and in the kind of colonized way we've been taught, and look at it in a more equitable, sustainable way, moving forward, and vote for those constructs that create more equity and more sustainability and joy. Thank you.
So I'm being told that we actually ran out of time, because we have another session, Q&A session. You can, if you'd like, you can quickly drop your information where people can find you on social media or your website. thank you so much for joining us today. And I learned a little bit more about you guys, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And
Oh, of
it's
course.
so nice to meet all of you.